Hello, thanks for those kind words. I tried to bring you a little bit sunshine inside with my bright yellow slides. Let's see how this works. When I was a kid, I read really tons of books. And one time I decided that I will write a book myself. And I started a story of this brave girl who was poor but very resourceful. The kind of character that I used to read about. Then I thought, hey, I will actually invite my grandmother to join this co-authoring with me. And I sent her my first draft, and she was delighted and started writing and sent me back her continuation of the story. The end. What she wrote to me was completely different what I had in mind. She talked about a girl that was not close to what I had imagined. I think the girl was maybe even from a different century. So I wasn't motivated to continue. Co-creation is difficult. Different kind of interpretations, expertises, different kind of languages, professional skills and so on. So it doesn't always work. But this is also the reason why co-creation is extremely important, interesting, and actually very much unavoidable. So the title of my talk, Co-Creative Practices in Service Design, actually is adapted from a chapter that we wrote together with Stefan Holmlid and Kirsikka Vaajekallio and Frauke Slesvig-Pisser. So I learned a little bit of co-authoring during these years. Of course, the main reason for co-creation is very much in line with what Samsa talked earlier about bringing people together to figure out together what are the issues, create understanding and make sense of things, and then from there also develop solutions. And this is very much what I've been doing in my career, designing tools for fostering empathy and facilitating collaboration in design. But it's also more than that, and some authors think about co-creation as collective creativity, and referring to moments where two or more people come together and they really create and become creative together. This often takes place in this kind of design processes where we might have several workshops or different kind of activities where people come together and this co-creation happens, maybe facilitated by designers. But there are also thoughts that it's a larger phenomena. It's like it goes beyond the code designing processes or product development processes. And I think Samsa just mentioned about this era of participation that really addresses this issue, what's going on at the world today. Well, co-creation deals with service design, because service design is constructed in relationships. It has interactions and it has relationships, and very much co-creation is within there. And I guess I can't give a talk without talking about empathy. And so empathy originally was really about in design. It's really the designers trying to step into the shoes of the users and trying to see the world from that perspective. And we develop all kinds of tools to facilitate that process. Within service design, the picture becomes a little bit more complex because it's not always the designer who makes decisions. It's various different kind of stakeholders that are involved. And what we are trying to do is facilitate their understanding of the user so that we can create services that where the customer journey, in a way, is very smooth and enjoyable and experiential. And when we deal with co-creation as a kind of societal a trend, then it's not only the design part that is important, but we actually need to also see that there are different kind of relationships, different kinds of stakeholders, organizations, people in those organizations, cross-sector, cross-departmental collaboration that also needs facilitation. And within that facilitation, also empathy is needed. So from my perspective, we've been focusing quite a lot on relations. Service interactions happen between people, and it's very much about these kind of relationships. It's a balance between human-centered view and the systemic view. And when doing these kind of processes and facilitating collaboration and at the same time trying to create something new, we can also think about designing as a catalyst for change. And at the same time, when we are developing solutions, we actually touch upon issues that can also cause transformation, and we can look at organizational changes and developments. And if we look even further on into infrastructuring, as titled by some wise people, we can also be part of something that creates a ground and paves the way into helping solving societal challenges and creating settings where maybe hopefully some life becomes easier and improving sustainable or such big questions. So these kind of simplified versions of design process as double diamond are far, far too narrow to describe the situation we're dealing today. And Samsa already showed another kind of a picture where this kind of what we could call post-design or use after design is relevant and really important part to address also in the design processes. These authors, they tried to make a map on how does it look when there's a design for, so the designers are designing for people, or when it's more like participatory, when people also, the users or the people who are affected by designs are part of the process. In our chapter, we also talk about design time. Design time means that that's the co-creation activities where we try to figure out what's important, what is meaningful, what is valuable, what kind of things are needed, and then co-create also solution proposals. Then there's the implementation time that if we talk about service design, oftentimes what we're developing is some sort of platforms that actually start living only when they are implemented. And so in that phase, co-creation is needed in order to understand the relationships, to understand the networks that take place. And then we also talk about performance time, because service originally is co-created. A client and the service provider co-creates the service. And so I think that part, especially when we are looking at people-to-people interactions in service, hasn't been so much looked at in design research. And to demonstrate some of these, I show you a couple of examples of my students' work. So this year we collaborated with the city of Espoo. One team went to Iso-Omena Service Center, and they needed to develop services there. So in order to understand what's going on, what are the needs, what are the potentials in there, they actually engaged people in a very convivial way by offering coffee and and having conversation in exchange to identify the potential and critical issues. So this is one way of doing co-creative practices. Another team worked with Rantaraitti, this beautiful pathway in the seashore of Espoo that already has a couple of points with established services, but at the same time there is an interest in having also the local people, the communities, the residents in activating this path in a way that is enjoyable for all of us. So this team, it was a challenging task, I have to say. I was a bit wondering what's going to happen, but the students ended up proposing this kind of a model. And this is more or less like a prototype. Like if the residents want to organize an event, how would that happen? In this case, it was a singing happening. So actually, I also participated in that prototype, and we went singing by the beach in Matinkylä. But what the point with this is that this event happens in co-creation. It doesn't happen if if these different entities don't participate. So we need local business, we need the residents, we need the organizer, and we probably need also the city of Espoo to facilitate this process. A third example is from a previous project we did concerning youth and the problem that some young people are not feeling like part of the society. And we collaborated with Vamos. Vamos is one of these service centers where youth can go and then they are facilitated by experts in finding paths in their lives. And so in co-design processes, the student with the experts and with the youth develop these kind of interaction tools that look like games. And they are kind of, design games. One of these games actually ended up being used in a situation where the young person and the coach negotiate, reflect, and try to find out what are the barriers and what are the potentials in that person's life. And so, and this, in my opinion, this perspective where that design actually can be also implemented in this kind of service interactions is pretty new perspective in design. Then I come into quite a big project concerning a very topical issue, immigration. We collaborated with the Ministry of Employment and the Economy last year. The idea was to make a big picture and map out what's the immigration service journeys like. We had plenty of people involved. In that project, Helena Sustar, who was the main researcher, she actually had a very clear idea that we approached this issue with the empathic approach. And this is what we did. We had all the time in mind the kind of individual people's perspectives, and at the same time trying to all the time find the balance between the big picture and the individuals. Involving very many people, and I think this picture especially points the complexity of the work and how these different service organizations that kind of know what the others are doing, but at least in the workshop it seemed that it really clarified for them that how are they connected and what does it mean for them. So one of my research questions, and we're working on that at the moment, is how do you balance this big picture and especially when we're dealing with law and these kind of things and the individual and the empathic perspective within. As you've seen, so my research practice is actually very close to some of the things, the creative activities that we're doing on where the exploring of the questions and finding a solution go hand in hand. Part of that is that in some cases we've been the outcomes of the processes are not so tangible as design artifacts. But in one case, it was this Atlas project we had, and this was a collaborative process with the School of Science. We ended up, a little bit by accident, producing a tangible outcome through research, through analysis. This Atlas game helps in co-creating understanding of very crucial questions in this kind of question, the co-design activities and co-creation, like what is the motivation for change, what kind of, who are the people we should involve, what are the methods we should use, and so on. And this game, surprisingly, was extremely useful for us researchers in order to reach also the more like traditional research outcomes. Finally, I also wanted to point out in my talk that if you think about the kind of things that I presented, they're very much in there somewhere in Espoo, in Otane, in Iso Omena, or in the ministries. But I think also in our own work as educators and researchers, there's a lot of potential in applying the similar kind of approaches. And this is actually what I've started doing in my own teaching, But there's still plenty to do and be more able to argument for them and what are the contents and what are the details in there in terms of materials, in terms of interactions, in terms of setting the stage, because this is what we are educating the students who are going to be the ones who orchestrate co-creation and make choreographies for changing the world. Thank you.